think that, looking back, of course, there's the creating of YouTube. And so from that objective sense, YouTube did transform the world, and automatically my name's always paired along with the creator of YouTube. But I think just like there are many successes in Silicon Valley, across the world, there are also many failures, but it's not always attributable to the actual potential of the person. I think at the core, it's just whether or not, I think the harder step to take is that first initial step of, if you have an idea, would you be daring enough, courageous enough, brave enough to say, I'm going to give up everything else, potentially sacrifice a large part of my life to go try to create something. So to me, that's the part that I like having as a characteristic myself, is to be able to say, look, if I have an idea, no matter what other people say, I'll take that first step. And unfortunately, sometimes it's based on that final outcome, whether or not you sell the company, whether or not this company goes IPO, that you're actually, stamped as a genius or someone with a silly idea that should have never been done. But in my mind, I think I'm a person that, would be courageous, or, you could say ignorant of other people's opinions in a way, to be able to always take that first step regardless of what people think. It's a good question. I think the Gold Card program started a few months before, I think, where it was really aggressively adopted because of COVID, right? So it was launched in early 2019, fully a year before any of the people that really started coming back in masses started coming back and applying for it like they are now because of COVID. So in that period, it was really just still to bring in professionals coming back. And so if you've accomplished something, whether it's in arts, music, science and technology, you apply for the Gold Card, and the idea was to be able to attract maybe Taiwanese Americans or just Taiwanese living abroad that have done something that want to come back. But then in terms of the family, it wasn't considered that they would always be bringing their family back. It was more of a second thought. Now they've seen it work for 12 months, and they know that the best opportunities are actually when you bring the entrepreneur back, but you want them to really settle down here. Therefore, you also need to want to help bring their entire family back. If they have kids, help their kids settle in. If they have spouses, help them get settled in. So it's a learning process as we start going along. Yeah, I think a lot of things, right? So this was about April this was April of 2018 when the Gold Card was first created, when I first got it. And at the time, it had already been discussed for a long period inside the government about creating such a program, because they knew that there were a lot of Taiwanese Americans abroad that had accomplished something, especially in Silicon Valley, but not just Taiwanese Americans, but Taiwanese, Singaporeans, Taiwanese people living in Hong Kong, Taiwanese living in Europe and Australia, that have all done something. And there's a way to be able to try to attract them back to Taiwan, and the Gold Card was the passage for that, was the bridge to be able to do that. They reached out to me to say that we're creating this program. Can you be kind of the point person to be able to receive the card? You need to physically be here to actually be with the the legislative branch, the executive branch, to be actually holding this up and doing some of the interviews and the photos. But we were also the first ones to really use that card. So by the time that we moved here back in August of 2019, so a significant time had passed already, we were the first ones to actually completely use that card for the purpose that it was printed for. So it was going to be packing all of our bags up from Silicon Valley, moving the kids, changing schools, finding apartments, everything it is, and moving that over here to Taiwan. And every step, I think being the first in any one of these major projects, major initiatives, is always a difficult thing. But I think a lot of it just depends on maybe your outlook, perspective on it. And we kind of look at it as, yes, there are challenges, but then as part of that is it's also exciting. It beats the typical day. is when you're actually always trying to find something, a new way to be able to solve something. So the kids and I, we've had a great time here so far, calling Taiwan our new home. And the first few months here was more, I think, more passive, nothing active on my part, educating myself, learning more about the system. Why was it that so many Taiwanese Americans have been successful, for example, yet it's been harder to be able to create these global companies from inside Taiwan? You know, why is it that over a period of these years, as soon as these Taiwanese that were born in Taiwan, but when they fly to the US, they create the companies? Why is it that these same Taiwanese, maybe a lot of them related, cousins, brothers, sisters of these entrepreneurs, why are they not creating it here? So for the first few months here was working with, like Tai-Dai University and going and giving some talks, doing some of the incubators, meeting some of the incubators, meeting some of the, going to some of the workspaces, even meeting with some of the early stage investors in the companies they've invested in, to be able to get a sense of across the entire spectrum of why is it that, what is it that's missing from here compared to, say, Silicon Valley? If it's Taiwanese Americans, if it's Taiwanese, then what else is there? Is it because of the funding? Is it because of the, the upbringing, the education, the general culture? And then it seemed like everybody was on the same page, knowing that that was a problem, as to there's something that's missing that's making it harder for Taiwanese to be able to start globally successful companies. And I think a lot of people had different, I hinted at some of them, a lot of people had different ideas as to what they were, but I think the best way to really be able to understand it is to start something yourself, to actually be on the front lines yourself. And so May of this year, so after a few months back here in Taiwan, about 6 months ago, I decided to start my own company here in Taiwan. But doing it in a way that's a little bit different. So doing it in a way where you're still linked up to a Delaware company in the US, doing it in a way where we're still planning on fundraising from the US, doing it in a way where the first language that we're launching the app, the service in, is going to be in English, where Chinese, where Mandarin is going to be a version 2 release. The global target audience is going to be global rather than the domestic market. But we'll see. I mean, these are some of the things that I think is going to be different. That's going to make the difference between a successful company versus non-successful company. But along the way, so far in the short 5-6 months here, I've noticed that some of the things that people have said were the weaknesses of Taiwan are certainly not true. One part, people say the engineers, the engineers, the way that they're brought up, they don't have that spirit of sort of entrepreneurial spirit to think outside the box. That's certainly not true. The engineers, the UI designers, the iOS, the iPhone, the iPad engineers that we have here, the back-end systems engineers, one, they're just as good quality as any engineer that you're going to find anywhere in the world, especially Silicon Valley. And two, they do think out of the box. They do think startup-ish. They're not just thinking about trying to build on top of something without trying to explore the perimeters or thinking outside the box completely. I would say that if you put these engineers up against any of the engineers in Silicon Valley, they're going to be comparable, equivalent to the best engineers in the world. Well, I think there are some parts, some attributes of Taiwan that you just can't escape. The coordinates on the map. Taiwan is where Taiwan is, and so if you want, cooler summers, you're not going to get that in Taiwan, right? So some of these things you just can't change. Some of the political affiliations that Taiwan has, you just can't change. So what are some of the things that Taiwan can change to make it at least the comparable to maybe to Silicon Valley or to some of the other countries out there that are producing some of the best startups outside of Silicon Valley, or their best they provide the best core to allow entrepreneurs, global entrepreneurs, to gravitate towards. So when I think about it, is that good ideas come from a lot of different people, but when you want to start a company, they don't organically come from Silicon Valley. I was born in Taiwan, I grew up in the Midwest, but I moved to Silicon Valley to join PayPal at the time and eventually start YouTube. nobody at PayPal actually that started PayPal actually was born in Silicon Valley. Nobody that started YouTube was actually born in Silicon Valley. We all moved there. So I think a part of it is, how do you make Taiwan be a target destination for people that want to create companies? Taiwan can't do this. Taiwan has 23 million people. So if you want to be successful, you need to be successful outside of Taiwan. There are challenges and complications with that. One, language, culture. If you want to build for the worldwide international audience, maybe it has to be in English. Well, how comfortable are you in building an application in English? And then more specifically, how comfortable are you to know what the problems are that people in the US face, and how comfortable are you with the solution that you're actually trying to create is the right solution for? So you're almost exporting a startup idea without fully understanding what the target audience truly needs if you're not from there. So these are some of the challenges that Taiwan has, but it's not, it's not insurmountable. I mean, you have countries like Israel and Singapore that have done a fantastic job, and they put so much of their national, interest in funding, satellite offices in Silicon Valley and LA and New York. So they actually help bring some of the best entrepreneurs they have from their countries, put them up to stay there for a while, to be able to connect them up with the best entrepreneurs that they have locally there, the best investors that they have close relationships with there. And they create a whole circle of being able to get good ideas from their countries to be able to gravitate towards the US, to places that's the core of some of these best ideas, and then keep looping that around. I think that's something that if I were, maybe not for all of, trying to help out all of Taiwan, but specifically just trying to help the next, billion-dollar company to come out of Taiwan, those are the things that I would do to be able to kind of more integrate Taiwan into the larger global picture. And I think there are, I think in 20, 30 years ago, even beyond, starting from like the 1970s and 80s, there was a lot of, let's say, export, but not of semiconductors, but talent, individual human talent, right, raw talent that's coming out. And I think that it's a great period right now. There's so many things, so many great things potential in Taiwan right now. It just seems like it just needs the secret sauce, maybe the recipe, to be able to somehow glue all this together, to be able to kind of create this next generation of just, whether it's a product or whether it's something that's going to be coming out of Taiwan that puts it back on that global map again. And I think that, I think that it's still something that hasn't been, that the whole recipe hasn't been written out yet, but I think the timing is right now is the period to do it. And so I think one of the things is that, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, if there's anything that you can think of to be able to contribute back and give back to Taiwan, now is the time to do it.